morning, everyone. Pastor Jason here. Thank you for sharing with this morning's devotional. I hope it's something that blesses you. I hope it's something that you feel led to share with others. I want to read from John 4:13 real quick. It says, Jesus replied, "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give them will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life." Man, it's just another day. It's just a sit down. It's just a rest. It's in the middle of the hot of the day, and Jesus finds a place to sit by a well. He just needs to relax. The disciples are going to take care of a couple things. And then she shows up, a woman, in the middle of the day, in the hot part of the day, obviously out there to stay away from everyone. She goes to the well when she knows no one else will be there. And as her and Jesus begin to strike up a conversation, he begins to ask questions. He begins to ask personal questions, uncomfortable questions, laying things out that he shouldn't know, but he does. And as she begins to respond, she all too willingly lays out her shame, lays out her baggage, puts everything out before him. Basically, talks about how she's had 5 different husbands, and actually ends up saying the 5th one is not her husband at all. When Jesus points that out, she willingly responds and tells him of her shame. It's laid out before her and him right there in the heat of the day. The shame is obvious to everyone, and she feels guilty. But before she goes, Jesus doesn't let her leave without telling her what I just read to you. That, she has to come to that well every day to get water, but he has water that he can give her where she'll never be thirsty again. And as she begins to realize who she is, she knows he's speaking of a spiritual water. She knows he's speaking of a spiritual life. She knows he is speaking of freedom from shame. Now, how in the world does laying all this out in the hot sun before one another, her laying her shame out, Jesus pointing it out, how does this help get to the root of the matter? How does this help get her to eternal life? One word: grace. Grace. After everything's before them, after Jesus points out, look, I know everything you're hiding, and after she willingly says, yes, all these things are going on in my life, he doesn't judge her. He doesn't hold it against her. He gives her grace. See, one thing we have to understand that we can get from this story, grace is not simply forgiving. Grace is not simply freedom from sin. Grace is not something that just frees us from shame. Grace is an open door. Grace is not one act that God has granted us in our life. Grace is a way of being that God has granted us in our life. Grace is a way of eternal life. That's what Jesus meant when he said, look, if you keep coming after this kind of water, you'll always be thirsty. In other words, you keep coming after earthly fixes for your life. You keep coming after the normal things that you know how to do. You're going to have to keep doing that. You'll never get free from your shame. You'll never get free from your guilt. But I have something that once it comes into your life, it changes the way your life is. And you'll never be thirsty again. That's the grace that Jesus gives us. That's the grace that gives us that walk into eternal life. So many believers, they're still struggling with sin and shame. Why is that? Why are they still struggling with that? Well, if that may be even you today, ask, what is your driving force in life? Is it shame? Is it shame that makes you go to God all the time? Well, I've just got to go to God because I messed up again today. I got to go to God because shame is my driving force, or is grace your driving force? If shame that you've held on to, if your old life, the past, you've held on to it, you've held on to that guilt, and you just can't get rid of it, let God forgive you. Let Jesus grant you his grace, and let grace become your driving force. Because when grace becomes your driving force, you not only walk in that freedom and that forgiveness, it becomes your walk of doing things. It helps you to walk in freedom. It helps you to break the sin cycle. It helps you to break that cloud that will be hanging over your head of guilt. Grace is the door to everything that Jesus has for us. God bless you. Have an awesome day.